Hello, this is Morel Benard with the continuing story of Wuthering Heights, the story of Wuthering Heights. And please subscribe and please share. And the last words, we cannot be damper or colder in the rain than we are here. I suppose Catherine fulfilled her project, for the next sentence took up another subject. She waxed lachrymose. How little did I dream that Handel would ever make me cry so, she wrote. My head aches till I cannot keep it on the pillow, and still I can't give over. Poor Heathcliff. Hindley calls him a vagabond and won't let him sit with us nor eat with us any more. And he says he and I must not play together, and threatens to turn him out of the house if he breaks his orders. He has been blaming our father, how dared he, for treating H too liberally, and swears he will reduce him to his right place. I began to nod drowsily over the dim page. My eye wandered from manuscript to print. I saw a red ornamented title, 70 times 7, and the first of the 71st, a pious discourse delivered by the Reverend Jabez Branderham in the chapel of Gimmerden, South. And while I was half-consciously worrying my brain to guess what Jabez Branderham would make of his subject, I sank back in bed and fell asleep. Alas, for the effects of bad tea and bad temper. What else could it be that made me pass such a terrible night? I don't remember another that I can at all compare with since I was capable of suffering. I began to dream. Almost before I ceased to be sensible of my locality, I thought it was morning, and I had set out on my way home with Joseph for a guide. The snow lay yards deep in our road, and as we floundered on, my companion worried me with constant reproaches that I had not brought a pilgrim staff, telling me that I could never get into the house without one, and boastfully flourishing a heavy-headed cudgel, which I understood to be so denominated. For a moment I considered it absurd that I should need such a weapon to gain admittance into my own residence. Then a new idea flashed across me. I was not going there. We were journeying to hear the famous Jabez Branderham preach. From the text 70 times 7, and either Joseph, the preacher, or I had committed the first of the 71st, and were to be publicly exposed and excommunicated. We came to the chapel. I had passed it really in my walks twice or thrice. It lies in a hollow between two hills, an elevated hollow near a swamp, whose peaty moisture is said to answer all the purposes of embalming on the few corpses deposited there. The roof has been kept whole hitherto, and as the clergyman's stipend is only £20 per annum, and a house with 2 rooms threatening speedily to determine into one, no clergyman will undertake the duties of pastor, especially as it is currently reported that his flock would rather let him starve than increase the living by 1 penny from their own pockets. However, in my dream, Jabez had a full and attentive congregation, and he preached, good God, what a sermon, divided into 490 parts, each fully equal to an ordinary address from the pulpit, and each discussing a separate sin. Where he searched for them, I cannot tell. He had his private matter of interpreting the phrase, and it seemed necessary the brother should sin different sins on every occasion. They were of the most curious character, odd transgressions that I never imagined previously. Oh, how weary I grew. How I writhed and yawned and nodded and revived. How I pinched and pricked myself and rubbed my eyes and stood up and sat down again and nudged Joseph to inform me if he would ever have done. I was condemned to hear all out. Finally, he reached the first of the 71st. At that crisis, a sudden inspiration descended on me. I was moved to rise and denounce Jabez Branderham as the sinner of the sin that no Christian need pardon. "Sir," I exclaimed, "sitting here within these four walls at one stretch, I've endured and forgiven the 490 heads of your discourse. 70 times, 7 times have I plucked up my hat and been about to depart. 70 times, 7 times have you preposterously forced me to resume my seat. The 491st is too much. Fellow martyrs, have at him. Drag him down and crush him to atoms, that the place which knows him may know him no more." "Thou art the man," cried Jabez, after a solemn pause, leaning over his cushion. 70 times, 7 times did thou gapingly contort thy visage. 70 times 7 did I counsel with my soul. Lo, this is human weakness. This also may be absolved. The first of the 71st is come. Brethren, execute upon him the judgment written, such honour of all his saints." With that concluding word, the whole assembly, exalting their pilgrim staffs, rushed round me in a body, and I, having no weapon to raise in self-defence, commenced grappling with Joseph, my nearest and most ferocious assailant, for his. In the confluence of the multitude, several clubs crossed. Blows aimed at me fell on other sconces. Presently, the whole chapel resounded with rappings and counter-rappings. Every man's hand was against his neighbour. And Branderham, unwilling to remain idle, poured forth his zeal in a shower of loud taps on the boards of the pulpit, which responded so smartly that at last, to my unspeakable relief, they woke me. And what was it that had suggested the tremendous tumult? What had played Jabez's part in the row? Merely the branch of a fir tree that touched my lattice as the blast wailed by and rattled its dry cones against the panes. I listened doubtingly an instant, detected the disturber, then turned and dozed and dreamt again, if possible still more disagreeably than before. This time I remembered I was lying in the oak closet, and I heard distinctively the gusty wind and the driving of the snow. I heard also the fir bough repeat its teasing sound, and ascribed it to the right cause, but it annoyed me so much that I resolved to silence it, if possible, and I thought. I rose and endeavoured to unhasp the casement. The hook was soldiered into the staple, a circumstance observed by me when awake but forgotten. I must stop it, nevertheless, I muttered, knocking my knuckles through the glass and stretching an arm out to seize the importunate branch, instead of which my fingers closed on the fingers of a little ice-cold hand. The intense horror of nightmare came over me. I tried to draw back my arm, but the hand clung to me, and a most melancholy voice sobbed, "Let me in! Let me in!" "Who are you?" I asked, struggling, meanwhile, to disengage myself. "Catherine Linton," it replied shiveringly. Why did I think of Linton? I had heard Earnshaw 20 times for Linton. I'm come home. I'd lost my way on the moor. As it spoke, I discerned obscurely a child's face looking through the window. Terror made me cruel, and finding it useless to attempt shaking the creature off, I pulled its wrist onto the broken pane and rubbed it to and fro till the blood ran down and soaked the bedclothes. Still it wailed, "Let me in," and maintained its tenacious gripe, almost maddening me with fear. "How can I said at length. "Let me go if you want me to let you in." The fingers relaxed. I snatched mine through the hole, hurriedly piled the books up in a pyramid against it, and stopped my ears to exclude the lamentable prayer. I seemed to keep them closed above the quarter of an hour, yet the instant I listened again, there was the doleful cry, moaning on. "Begone!" I shouted. "I'll never let you in, not if you beg for 20 years. "It is 20 years, mourned the voice. 20 years. I've been away for 20 years. Threat began a feeble scratching outside, and the pile of books moved as if thrust forward. I tried to jump up, but could not stir a limb, and so yelled aloud in a frenzy of fright. To my confusion, I discovered the yell was not ideal. Hasty footsteps approached my chamber door. Somebody pushed it open with a vigorous hand, and the light glimmered through the squares of the top of the bed. I sat shuddering, yet, and wiping the perspiration from my forehead. The intruder appeared to hesitate, and muttered to himself. At last he said in a half a whisper, plainly not expecting an answer, "Is anyone here?" I considered it best to confess my presence, for I knew Heathcliff's accent, and feared he might search further if I kept quiet. With this intention, I turned and opened the panels. I should not soon forget the effect my action produced. Heathcliff stood near the entrance, in his shirt and trousers, with a candle dripping over his fingers and his face as white as the wall behind him. The first creak of the oak startled him like an electric shock. The light leaped from his hold to a distance of some feet, and his agitation was so extreme that he could hardly pick it up. "It is only your guest, sir," I called out, desirous to spare him the humiliation of exposing his cowardice further. "I had the misfortune to scream in my sleep, owing to a frightful nightmare. I'm sorry I disturbed you." "Oh, God confound you, Mr. Lockwood. I wish you were at the—" commenced my host, setting the candle on the chair because he found it impossible to hold it steady. "And who showed you up into this room?" he continued, crushing his nails into his palms and grinding his teeth to subdue the maxillary convulsions. "Who was it? I've a good mind to turn them out of the house this moment." "It was your servant Zillah," I replied, flinging myself on the floor and rapidly resuming my garments. "I should not care if you did, Mr. Heathcliff. She richly deserves it. I suppose that she wanted to get another proof that the place was haunted at my expense. Well, it is, swarming with ghosts and goblins. You have reason in shutting it up, I assure you. No one will thank you for a doze in such a den." "What do you mean?" asked Heathcliff. "And what are you doing?" Lie down and finish out the night since you are here. But for heaven's sake, don't repeat that horrid noise. Nothing could excuse it unless you were having your throat cut. If the little fiend had got in at the window, she probably would have strangled me, I returned. I'm not going to endure the persecutions of your hospitable ancestors again. Was not the Reverend Jabel Banderham akin to you on the mother's side? And that minx, Catherine Linton or Earnshaw, or however she was called, she must have been a challenging, wicked little soul. She told me she had been walking the earth these 20 years. A just punishment for her mortal transgressions, I've no doubt. Scarcely were these words uttered when I recollected the association of Heathcliff's with Catherine's name in the book, which had completely slipped from my memory till thus awakened. I blushed at my inconsideration, but without showing further consciousness of the offence, I hastened to add, "The truth is, sir, I passed the first part of the night in." Here I stopped afresh. I was about to say pursuing those old volumes. Then it would have revealed my knowledge of their written as well as their printed content. So, correcting myself, I went on, "In spelling over the name scratched on that window ledge, a monotonous occupation calculated to set me asleep like counting ore." "What can you mean by talking in this way to me?" thundered Heathcliff with savage vehemence. How dare you? Under my roof? God, he's mad to speak so." And he struck his forehead with rage. I did not know whether to resent this language or pursue my explanation, but he seemed so powerfully affected that I took pity and proceeded with my dreams, affirming I had never heard the appellation of Catherine Linton before, but reading it often overproduced an impression which personified itself when I had no longer my imagination under control. Heathcliff gradually fell back into the shelter of the bed as I spoke, finally sitting down, almost concealed behind it. I guessed, however, by his irregular and intercepted breathing, that he struggled to vanquish an excess of violent emotion. Not liking to show him that I had heard the conflict, I continued my toilet rather noisily, looked at my watch, and solicited on the length of the night. Not 3 o'clock yet. I could have taken oath it had been 6. Time stagnates here. We must surely have retired to rest to date. "Always at 9 in winter, and rise at 4, said my host, suppressing a groan, and, as I fancied by the motion of his arm's shadow, dashing a tear from his eyes. "Mr. Lockwood," he added, "you may go into my room. You'll only be in the way, coming downstairs so early, and your childish outcry has sent sleep to the devil for me." "And for me too," I replied. "I'll walk in the yard till daylight, and then I'll be off, and you need not dread a repetition of my intrusion. I'm now quite cured of seeking pleasure in society, be it country or town. A sensible man ought to find sufficient company in himself." "Delightful company," muttered Heathcliff. "Take the candle and go where you please. I shall join you directly. Keep out of the yard, though. The dogs are unchained. And the house, Juno mounts sentinels there, and nay, you can only ramble about the steps and passages. But away with you. I'll come in 2 minutes." I obeyed, so far as to quit the chamber. When ignorant where the narrow lobbies led, I stood still and was witness, involuntarily, to a piece of superstition on the part of my landlord, which belied oddly his apparent sense. He got onto the bed and wrenched open the lattice, bursting as he pulled at it into an uncontrollable passion of tears. "Come in, come in," he sobbed. "Cathy, do come. Oh, do come, once more. Oh, my heart, darling, hear me. This time, Catherine, at last." The sceptre showed a sceptre ordinary caprice. It gave no sign of being. But the snow and wind whirled wildly through, each reaching my station and blowing out the light. There was such anguish in the gush of grief that accompanied this raving that my compassion made me overlook its folly, and I drew off, half angry to have listened at all, and vexed at having related my ridiculous nightmare, since it produced that agony, though why was beyond my comprehension. I descended cautiously to the lower regions and landed in the back kitchen, where a gleam of fire, raked compactly together, enabled me to rekindle my candle. Nothing was stirring except a brindled grey cat, which crept from the ashes and saluted me with a quarrelsome mew. 2 benches, shaped in sections of a circle, nearly enclosed the hearth. To one of these I stretched myself, and Grimalkin mounted the other. We were both of us nodding ere any one invaded our retreat, and then it was Joseph, shuffling down a wooden ladder that vanished in the roof through a trap. The ascent to his garret, I suppose. He cast a sinister look at the little flame which I had enticed to play between the ribs, swept the cat from its elevation, and bestowing himself in the vacancy, commenced the operation of stuffing a 3-inch pipe with tobacco. My presence in this sanctum was evidently esteemed a piece of impudence too shameful for remark. He silently applied the tube to his lips, folded his arms, and puffed away. I let him enjoy the luxury unannoyed, and after sucking out his last breath and heaving a profound sigh, he got up and departed as solemnly as he came. You are listening to the video, Wuthering Heights. Please join me for the next video of Wuthering Heights. Join me, Morel Benard, for the next video of Wuthering Heights. And please subscribe. Please share. Join me the next video.